The night was cold, and the battlefield was quiet after the storm of war. Smoke rose from broken machines, and the ground was filled with ashes. In the middle of the camp, a human warrior sat alone near a fire. His armor was scratched, his sword rested by his side, and his eyes were fixed on the flames. The alien soldiers watched from a distance, whispering about him. He was only one man, yet his presence felt heavier than an army. He did not shout, he did not command, but his silence was stronger than their loudest war cry. They feared him, even when he was still. In his hands, he held a crown. It was not a human crown. It was alien, made of dark silver, sharp edges, and glowing symbols. It was a relic of power, a symbol of rule that had passed through generations of alien queens. The soldiers whispered that it was sacred, that no hand should touch it without kneeling. But the human did not kneel. He turned the crown slowly in his hands, studying its design with calm eyes. The queen herself watched from her tent, her heart pounding as she realized what he carried. That crown was not just an object, it was a piece of her bloodline, a promise of power. The fire cracked loudly, sending sparks into the air. The human warrior leaned forward and placed the crown on the flames. The silver metal hissed as the fire touched it, the glowing symbols fading to black. The soldiers gasped, some stepped forward, but none dared to stop him. The queen's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to command her warriors to attack. But something stronger than anger held her back. Fear. She remembered the old prophecy, one she had once laughed at in her youth. The one who burns the crown will bring our downfall, the prophecy had said. Her mother had told it to her, and her grandmother before that. It was a warning passed through the ages, but never taken seriously. Until now, when she saw the crown turning to ash in the hands of a human. The fire glowed brighter, as if the crown fed its hunger. The warrior's face was calm, his expression unreadable. He did not smile, he did not show triumph. He simply let the fire consume the symbol of her people's rule. The queen's hands trembled. She had fought humans for years, and she had won many victories. They were stubborn, reckless, and often foolish in battle. But this man was different. He did not fight with weapons alone. He fought with meaning. The crown melted slowly, dripping into the flames. The smell of burning metal filled the air. The soldiers whispered again, some calling him cursed, some calling him chosen. The queen knew better. She knew the truth. The prophecy was alive. Her mind raced with questions. Why'd he do this? Did he know the prophecy? Did he mean to bring fear into her heart? She wanted to believe it was an accident. But deep inside, she knew he had done it with purpose. The warrior finally spoke, his voice low but strong. "This crown is nothing," he said, staring at the fire. "It is only fear, shaped into metal and passed from hand to hand." His words cut through the silence, echoing in every ear that heard them. The queen clenched her fists. Her people had always ruled by fear, and now this man had named it aloud. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, some even lowered their heads. The human's words had already begun to poison their belief in her. The night stretched on, and the crown was gone. Only black ashes remained in the fire, carried away by the wind. The human stood, his tall figure lit by the flames. He picked up his sword, but he did not raise it. He did not need to. The queen finally stepped forward, her eyes locked on him. Her voice trembled, but she tried to hide it. "Do you know what you have done?" she asked. The human looked at her, and for the first time, she saw no fear in his eyes, only defiance. "I destroyed your crown," he answered, his tone steady, "because fear is not a crown, and no fire can burn me." The queen's heart pounded. The prophecy rang in her ears. And for the first time in her reign, she felt truly afraid. The flames burned high behind him, his shadow stretching across the camp. The soldiers fell silent, not daring to speak. The queen realized too late what had happened. The moment the crown turned to ash, he had become her greatest fear. The night had passed, but the fire still glowed in the queen's mind. She could not sleep, though her tent was guarded by her most loyal soldiers. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crown burning, its silver melting, its power lost. And she saw the human standing there, his eyes calm, his voice sharp. Her people had always told the story of the crown. It was not only a symbol of power, but also a weapon of control. Every ruler who wore it could bend armies with fear. Fear was their strength. Fear was their chain. But the human had broken it in a single night. The queen paced inside her tent, her hands trembling. She was a warrior, trained from birth to never show weakness. She had led armies across galaxies, crushed rebellions, and silenced traitors. But this man, this single human, had shaken her more than any warlord ever had. Her mind returned again to the prophecy. It was a tale spoken in whispers, a warning that sounded like a myth. Her grandmother had told it to her when she was a child. The one who burns the crown will not be our servant. He will be our shadow and our end. She had laughed then, thinking no outsider would ever dare. Now she could hear those words like a curse on her heart. The soldiers outside her tent spoke in low voices. She could hear them, though they thought she was asleep. They were not speaking of her. They were speaking of him. Some called him reckless. Some called him fearless. But all of them spoke with fear, not of her, but of him. The queen's jaw tightened. For years she had ruled through terror, and her people had obeyed without question. Now, one human had stolen that terror away. And without fear, what was left of her rule? She stepped out of her tent, her eyes scanning the camp. The soldiers turned away quickly, as if ashamed to meet her gaze. Her chest tightened, because she saw the truth in their silence. They no longer looked at her as their greatest power. They looked toward the fire where the humans sat, and in their eyes, she saw something she could never allow: hope. The queen walked closer, her steps firm but her heart unsteady. The human was sharpening his sword, the firelight glinting on the steel. He did not rise when she approached. He did not bow. He only looked at her with the same calm defiance that had broken her sleep. "You do not understand what you have done," she said, her voice sharp. "You destroyed more than metal. You destroyed a bond of generations." The human kept sharpening his blade, his hands steady. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but cutting. "No crown should hold chains, and no chains should rule hearts." Her chest ached at his words, because she knew they were true, but she could not admit it, not to him, not to anyone. "Do you think you have one?" she asked, her voice rising with anger. The human looked into her eyes, and his calm gaze made her feel small. "I did not come to win," he said. "I came to burn fear." His words spread like fire through her thoughts. She wanted to strike him down, to silence his tongue forever. Yet her hand refused to move. Her spear felt heavier than iron, because deep inside, she knew striking him would not kill what he had started. Behind them, the soldiers watched silently. Not one of them moved to defend their queen. Not one of them lifted a weapon to threaten him. The fear that once belonged to her had shifted to him, and in that silence, she realized her throne was already shaking. The queen turned away quickly, hiding the tremble in her hands. She returned to her tent, but her mind was louder than the battlefield. She remembered the prophecy again, not just the warning of downfall, but the final line her grandmother had whispered: "The one who burns the crown will not destroy us with war, but with truth, and we will break ourselves." For the first time in her life, the queen felt powerless. She had thought power was steel, armies, and fire. But now she saw it in the eyes of one human who had nothing but courage. He had burned a crown, and with it, he had burned her certainty. The night stretched on, long and heavy, and though her people still called her queen, she knew the title no longer belonged to her alone. It belonged to the man by the fire, the man who had become her greatest fear. The dawn came slowly, spreading a pale light across the ruined battlefield. Ashes still floated in the air, drifting like silent snow. The human warrior stood near the remains of the fire, his shadow long and sharp in the morning glow. The crown was gone, nothing left but gray dust and broken memory. The alien soldiers watched him from a distance, whispering once again. Their voices were filled with confusion, anger, and something far more dangerous, respect. No one dared to approach him. No one dared to command him. He had no throne, no army, yet he carried a power that unsettled them all. The queen emerged from her tent, her face calm, but her heart restless. She had not slept. Her mind was filled with the prophecy. The image of the crown burning would not leave her thoughts. And the man who stood before her now felt more like a storm than a prisoner. The human lifted his sword, not to threaten, but to clean it with slow, careful movements. The blade caught the morning light, and the soldiers felt as if the sun itself had chosen to shine on him. One of the braver soldiers finally asked, "Why did you destroy it? Do you not fear what it meant?" The human looked at the soldier, his expression calm. "I do not fear symbols," he said. "I fear chains." The words carried through the camp like thunder. Every soldier heard them, every heart shook. The queen clenched her fists, anger rising because she could see their loyalty shifting. Her soldiers had once followed her commands without question. Now they listened to him, a human, as if his voice carried the weight of truth. She stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. "You speak boldly, but you are only one man," she said. "You stand in the heart of my camp, surrounded by my soldiers, yet you act as if you were king." The human turned his eyes toward her, unshaken. "I am no king," he answered. "I am a man who refuses to kneel." The queen's breath caught. The words cut deeper than any blade. Her people live by kneeling, by bowing to crowns. But he spoke as if standing tall was stronger than any army. For a moment, she saw in him not weakness, but something far greater, freedom. The soldiers whispered again, louder this time. Some nodded at his words. Others looked away in shame. The queen felt the ground shifting beneath her. Fear had always been her weapon, but now fear belonged to him. She raised her spear, pointing it toward him. "Do you challenge me?" she demanded, her voice fierce. The human did not flinch, his sword still at his side. "I challenge nothing," he said. "I destroy lies." His words struck like fire. The queen's heart raced, because she knew he was not only speaking to her. He was speaking to all of them. Her soldiers heard, and she could feel their thoughts breaking away from her chains. He was changing them, not with blood, but with defiance. She tried to laugh, to show him his words were meaningless. But the sound died in her throat, hollow and weak. The human stepped closer, his steps slow and steady. "You fear me," he said softly, "because you fear what you cannot control." The queen's grip tightened on her spear. Never before had anyone spoken to her like this. Never before had she felt her own voice falter before another. And yet here he stood, calm, fearless, as if the galaxy itself could not move him. The silence stretched across the camp, heavy and sharp. The soldiers waited, breathless, for the clash they thought would come. But no blow was struck, no weapon lifted, because the real battle was already being fought, not with blades, but with words. The queen stepped back, hiding her trembling heart. She wanted to order his death, to command her soldiers to strike. But she knew the truth. If she spoke that order, they might not obey. They might even stand with him, and that thought was more terrifying than any blade at her throat. The human turned away from her, as if she was nothing more than another shadow. He sat again by the fire, though it had nearly died out. His voice carried one last time through the camp. "Fear is your crown, but it no longer rules me." The queen felt her chest tighten, the prophecy burning in her mind. She had always believed her fear kept her throne strong. But now she understood. The man who burned her crown had already stolen her power, not with fire alone, but with the defiance that lived in his eyes. The sun rose higher, but the camp remained heavy with silence. The alien soldiers carried out their tasks, but their eyes always drifted toward the human. He had no crown, no throne, and yet their thoughts circled around him like planets around a star. The queen felt this shift, and it burned inside her like fire. She had ruled with fear, and fear had never betrayed her. But now, fear had changed its master, and that master was a man she had once thought weak. She could not let this stand, not in front of her soldiers, not in front of her people. If she allowed his defiance to continue, her reign would turn to dust. The queen strode into the camp, her armor shining, her spear clutched tightly in her hand. Her soldiers bowed as she passed, but she felt no strength in their bows. It was obedience by habit, not by belief, and that truth cut her deeper than any blade. The human looked up as she approached, his calm eyes meeting hers without hesitation. She hated those eyes, hated that they showed no fear, no submission. He had taken the prophecy and turned it into reality, and now she had no choice but to face him. "You dare stand before me as if you are equal," she said, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "You dare to defy me in the heart of my own camp." The human rose slowly, his movements steady, his sword still at his side. "I stand because I will not kneel," he answered, "and I defy because truth cannot bow." Gasps rippled through the soldiers. The queen's grip on her spear tightened, her heart pounding in her chest. Every word he spoke pulled more of her power away. And yet she could not silence him, because every soldier wanted to hear what he would say next. "You speak of truth," she spat, her anger sharp, "but truth is forged by power, and power belongs to me." The human shook his head, his voice calm. "Power built on fear is hollow. It dies when the fire burns it away." The queen's face flushed with rage. No one had ever dared speak to her like this. She had crushed kings, silenced traitors, destroyed entire worlds. But here stood a single man who spoke as if he were her equal, her rival, her shadow. "You believe yourself strong," she said, stepping closer, "but you are only one man, and I command legions." The human's voice did not rise, but his words struck harder than any shout. "Legions kneel to crowns, but men rise to freedom." The soldiers whispered again, louder this time. Some nodded, others clenched their fists in confusion. The queen saw the danger in their eyes. Every word he spoke planted seeds of rebellion, seeds that could destroy her empire from within. She lifted her spear, its point glinting in the light. Her voice cut through the camp like thunder. "Then fight me," she commanded. "Prove your words with blood." The human stood tall, his eyes never leaving hers. "I did not come to fight you," he said. "I came to break the fear that binds you." The queen's heart twisted, because she knew this was no coward's answer. It was defiance at its purest form. It was a refusal to play by her rules, a refusal to give her the power of battle. She wanted him to draw his sword, to clash steel with her, to prove her strength. But instead, he denied her the one thing she needed: control. The silence stretched, thicker than iron. Every soldier watched, waiting for the moment when steel would strike. But no strike came, only the sharp clash of words. And in that clash, the queen felt her throne cracking. Her spear lowered slightly, her hand trembling. She hated herself for it, hated that she could not keep it steady. The human saw it, and his voice grew softer, yet stronger. "You fear me, not because I'm stronger, but because I cannot be broken." The queen's chest tightened, her breath short. Never had anyone spoken to her like this. Never had anyone dared. And yet, he spoke as if he already knew the truth of her soul. She stepped back, just once, but that step was enough. Her soldiers saw it, and in their eyes she read the truth. She had lost the clash of wills. The human turned from her again, as if she was nothing but another shadow in the fire. He sat, calm as before, his silence louder than any victory cry. The queen's heart burned with rage and fear, because she knew, in that moment, the prophecy had already begun to consume her. The sky grew dark with storm clouds, heavy and full of thunder. The camp trembled under the sound of war drums echoing in the distance. The queen's scouts rushed back with panic in their voices. "The rebels have gathered," they shouted. "They march toward us with fire and steel." The queen stood tall, but her heart twisted inside. The timing felt cursed. as if the prophecy itself had called the enemy here. Her soldiers looked to her for command, but their eyes still drifted toward the human. Every glance burned her pride, but she could not deny the truth. His presence had changed them. The rebel army appeared on the horizon, a wave of banners and weapons. They were many, fierce and determined, and their voices roared like thunder. The queen's soldiers tightened their grips, fear crawling in their veins. The human, however, stood calm, his gaze fixed on the storm of enemies ahead. He stepped forward, his voice steady and sharp. "You fear them because you see their numbers," he said, "but numbers do not win battles." The soldiers listened, leaning toward his words. "You win by will, by standing when others fall, by refusing to bow." The queen clenched her fists, hating that his words gave her people strength. She wanted to silence him, yet she could not, because even she felt his words sink into her chest. He carried no crown, but he commanded belief with nothing more than defiance. The enemy charged, the ground shaking under their march. The queen raised her spear, her voice sharp. "Hold the line," she cried, though her command wavered in the air. Then the human's voice rose beside her, strong as fire. "Stand together, fight free, no crown rules you now." The soldiers roared back, louder than they ever had for her. Their fear turned to fury, their chains to strength. They clashed with the rebels, steel meeting steel, fire meeting fire. The battlefield erupted in chaos, screams, and blood. The queen fought at the front, her spear cutting through her enemies. She was fierce, but she felt something shift around her. Everywhere the human moved, the tide of battle changed. He fought with courage that spread like fire. Every strike of his blade gave strength to those beside him. The rebels pressed hard, their numbers overwhelming. But the queen's soldiers did not break, because they no longer fought for crowns or for fear. They fought because the human had taught them to stand. The queen's eyes followed him across the field. He cut through enemies like a storm, yet his face stayed calm. He was not only a warrior, he was a symbol, and she hated that symbol because it was stronger than her throne. At one moment, the rebels nearly broke through the line. The queen shouted orders, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Then the human appeared, his sword blazing in the light of fire and storm. He rallied the soldiers with a single cry: "Stand, fight, no fear." The line held, the rebels faltered. The queen saw it with her own eyes. The battle was turning. Not because of her, not because of her spear or her crown, but because of him, the man who had burned her crown and stolen her fear. The rebels pulled back, regrouping in anger and confusion. The queen's soldiers stood bloody and battered, but their spirits were alive. They looked not to her, but to him, and in their eyes she saw it again, the prophecy alive, breathing, unstoppable. The queen's heart raged, torn between pride and terror. She had always believed her throne was eternal, unshaken. But now, she realized it could fall in a single heartbeat. And that heartbeat was the human standing in the firelight, sword in hand. As thunder cracked above and lightning split the sky, the queen whispered to herself, unheard by her soldiers, "He is not only my enemy, he is my downfall." And the battle raged on, the prophecy pulling tighter around her soul. The storm raged above the battlefield, lightning tearing across the dark sky. The ground shook with the clash of steel and the cries of soldiers. But in the middle of the chaos, all eyes slowly turned toward one place. The queen and the human stood facing each other, their wills colliding harder than any blade. The queen's spear dripped with the blood of enemies, her armor cracked but shining. Her chest rose and fell with rage, her heart pounding with fury and fear together. The human sword was scarred from battle, but his grip was steady, his eyes calm. He did not look at her with hate, nor with respect, but with unshakable defiance. For hours, the battle had raged around them. Yet every soldier knew the true war was between these two. Prophecy hung in the air like smoke, and every breath carried its weight. The queen's voice finally cut through the storm. sharp and trembling. "You burned my crown, you broke my fear, but now you will kneel before my blade." The human's reply was quiet, but it pierced louder than thunder. "I kneel to nothing, not to crowns, not to fear, and not to you." The queen roared, her spear striking forward with lightning speed. The human blocked, sparks flying as steel met steel. The clash echoed across the field, drawing soldiers to pause in their own fights. Every strike of the queen was fierce, born from years of war and power. Every block of the human was steady, born from will and defiance. Their weapons danced, but their true battle was deeper. It was not strength against strength. It was fear against freedom. The queen pressed harder, her spear striking like a storm. She screamed with each thrust, trying to bury her fear under rage. But the human never faltered. His calm grew heavier with every blow he stopped. "You fight with anger," he said, his voice calm even as their blades clashed. "But anger breaks, and fear bends, and neither can hold forever." Her chest tightened, his words cutting into her more than his sword. She struck again, harder, her spear nearly breaking his guard. For a moment, she thought she saw victory, but then he stepped closer, his blade pushing her weapon aside. His eyes met hers, and she froze because there was no fear in them. The prophecy whispered in her mind, "The one who burns the crown will not fall to your strength, for your strength is already his." Her breath shook, and in that instant, her spear felt heavier than stone. She faltered just for a second, but in battle a second is forever. The human struck, not to kill, but to break. His blade hit her spear and shattered its tip. The sound rang across the battlefield like thunder. Her soldiers gasped, their queen's weapon broken before their eyes. The queen stumbled back, her heart pounding with terror. Never had her spear failed her. Never had her strength betrayed her. She lifted the broken weapon again, but her hands trembled. The human stepped forward, his voice low and certain. "Your power was never the spear, nor the crown. It was fear, and now it is gone." Her knees weakened, rage and despair mixing inside her like poison. She wanted to scream, to deny his words, but her voice failed. Around them, the battle still raged, but to every soldier watching, the outcome was already clear. Their queen had broken, not by death, but by fear of the man who refused to kneel. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and the human lowered his blade. He could have ended her, but he did not. Instead, he turned from her, leaving her to the silence of her own defeat. That mercy struck deeper than any wound, because in sparing her, he proved the prophecy true. He was stronger than her crown, her fear, and her will. The queen fell to her knees, her broken spear in her hands. Her soldiers watched, torn between loyalty and doubt. And in that moment, she knew the truth she had feared since the fire. He was her greatest fear, and it was too late to stop him. The storm faded slowly, leaving the battlefield covered in smoke and silence. The clash of armies had ended, the rebels scattered, the queen's soldiers standing bruised and bloodied. But victory did not belong to her, not to her crown, not to her throne. It belonged to the human who had stood against her and against fear itself. The queen knelt in the ashes, her broken spear heavy in her hands. The once sacred weapon was nothing more than shattered metal now. Her soldiers stood around her, but none moved to lift her up. Their eyes no longer held the same obedience, the same blind fear. Instead, they looked past her, toward the man who stood silent in the fading light. The human sword rested at his side, his face calm, his eyes unshaken. He did not raise his voice. He did not call himself ruler. Yet in every soldier's heart, his presence felt stronger than any crown. The queen saw it, and it pierced deeper than any blade. She had lost not in battle, but in spirit. She wanted to shout, to remind them who she was. She was their queen, their ruler, their fear. But when she opened her mouth, the words refused to come, because even she no longer believed them. Her mind whispered the prophecy again, the word she had denied all her life. The one who burns the crown will not come as servant. He will come as shadow, and he will end your reign, not with death, but with truth. She had thought it was only a story, only an old tale to frighten children. But now she lived inside it, every line carving itself into her heart. The human finally turned toward her, his steps slow, steady, unhurried. The queen lifted her eyes, meeting his gaze. She expected cruelty, triumph, or vengeance. But she found none. Instead, his calm eyes held something worse, mercy. "You were never my enemy," he said softly, his voice carrying through the silence. "You were your own fear, and fear has already broken you." The queen's breath trembled, her heart collapsing under the weight of his words. She wanted to deny them, but tears stung her eyes, because she knew he was right. Her soldiers stood frozen, watching the moment as if the universe itself held its breath. The queen dropped her broken spear, the sound echoing like the last note of song. Her hands shook as she whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. "You were never a man I should have feared," she said. "You were the fear itself, the fear that I could never control." The human said nothing more. He turned from her, walking toward the horizon where the storm clouds parted. His shadow stretched long behind him, larger than life. The queen bowed her head, knowing the prophecy was complete. Her throne was ashes, her crown was gone. Her fear had become flesh and walked away. The battlefield lay quiet, the soldiers unsure of what came next. Some still stood by their queen, but their loyalty was empty. Others looked to the human, though he did not ask for them. He carried no banners, no crown, no throne. Yet his defiance had carved itself into history. The queen wept silently, her tears falling into the dirt. She had ruled for years, conquered worlds, crushed enemies. But she had never faced a power like this. A man who fought not with armies, but with truth. A man who had burned her crown, broken her fear, and left her powerless. Too late, she realized the truth. Too late, she understood the meaning of the prophecy. Too late, she knew that her greatest fear was not death, but him. And as his figure vanished into the smoke and light, the queen whispered into the silence, "You were always my greatest fear, and I saw it only when it was too late."